Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Counseling Compact, Exciting Momentum for Our Profession. Before we begin, I'd just like to make sure everyone can hear me okay, so please just type the word yes into the chat box if you can hear me. Great. Each attendee is in listen-only mode to avoid having background noises that may distract you from listening to the webinar. Throughout the presentation, the staff member will be managing the chat and question box on your Zoom control panel. If you have any questions or responses during the presentation, please type them into the chat box. Registration is open for our 2023 AMHCA Annual Conference. Our conference will be held June 27th through the 29th in New Orleans, Louisiana at the Royal Sonesta Hotel. More information and registration can be found at www.amhca.org/conference. And without further ado, I'll now turn it over to the president of AMHCA's Board of Directors, Frederick Dombrowski.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for all the amazing and wonderful work that you do. And we'd like to thank everyone for attending today as we have an opportunity to talk about the Counseling Compact, exciting momentum for our profession. It is absolutely my honor to present Gray Otis, Jerry Stevens, and Anna Lieber. This is going to be a wonderful presentation, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, we're grateful to be with you all. We understand we've got quite a few folks out there, and we're delighted to have you join us today for this overview of the Counseling Compact. It is an exciting time for our profession. As you know, Medicare legislation was enacted after, 20 plus years. And we also getting now some Department of Veterans Affairs job occupation specialty definitions for our profession, separate from other mental health professions. So this is an amazing time, and a big part of it, not only in the fact that the Counseling Compact is moving forward, but that we're really excited about what this means in a broader sense for recognition and acknowledgement of you as clinical mental health counselors and all of us as a part of this exciting profession. I'm really excited to have with me today Jerry Stevens, a longtime AMHCA Chair of Ethics, and she's going to talk a little bit about that, but currently Chair of the State Chapter Relations Committee, as well as Anna Lieber, a longtime associate of mine here in Utah, who is the president of the Utah Mental Health Counselors Association and was very active in getting the Counseling Compact legislation passed here, as was Jerry in Maine. So you got some real good experience here of people that understand about what this means for our profession and how we can work with state legislators to make the Counseling Compact go forward in all of the various states. So without further ado, let's move on here. And Anna and Jerry will pop in. We thought we'd just at least let you know who are the members of the AMHCA Counseling Compact Committee. These individuals have been working with us for months now. We've developed some good ideas to share with you, and that's part of why we wanted to meet with you today. But we want to give a special thanks to all of these folks who have all contributed in some form or fashion to our work on the Counseling Compact Committee for AMHCA. So let me just go over briefly what the overall objective is. And I'm just going to read this. To improve access, that's really important, to mental health therapy services. And that's the selling point to legislatures right there. But how is that accomplished? Well, through portability, crossing state lines, and reciprocity, which includes practice across state lines, while preserving the regulatory authority of the states. This is another important factor. It's how the states see their own sovereignty and how they can continue to regulate their profession within their state. And ultimately, because of all of this working together, it is there to protect the public health and safety while access is increased. Let's go and talk some more about that.
So the compact applies to fully licensed counselors, and there continues to be some confusion around that. But the intent are that these people are already fully licensed mental health counselors, and like Gray said, it's for portability, and that's licensure by endorsement. And when you think about portability, when people cross state lines or when they come into your state. Sometimes it's really complicated to get licensed because there's rules and regulations that might be different. And so what it does is the portability makes it easier so that people can get licensed faster if being part of the counseling compact. And the next one, thank you. And then reciprocity, and that's really for fully licensed counselors in their home compact state to practice in other states. And so that's really more about the telehealth piece of it. And it's a privilege to practice in other states where they have chosen to become part of the compact as well. So it gets a little confusing. However, these are the two areas that are really important. Thanks, Anna. So like Gray had said, we're really looking at increasing public access for fully licensed counselors to allow the telehealth technology to increase care, to increase services. What's interesting is it was happening anyway. And so this at least allows for the state to protect the public health and the services. It also gives a place for if there's a problem, that they can file a complaint back at the home state with wherever your home license is. And that's the state that would be regulating that license. It also eliminates unnecessary administrative costs and the need for licenses in multiple states. I don't know about where you all are, but I know in Maine, there's many people who have Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts license. That can be really costly. And then to provide continuity of care for interstate practices by licensed clinical mental health counselors. And so those people who do meet we can work with. Thank you. The next one.
So a little background here. Compacts are brought about in many different ways, but one of the primary agencies that have acted is the Council of State Governments, who has a subsection called the National Center for Interstate Compacts. And they are really ones that are managing the counseling compact. There are other organizations that do similar work, but MCIC has done a great job in doing that and has worked to approve compacts in multiple states. One of the ones that's most known by many people are the Nurses Compact. The Counseling Compact is legislative authorized contract between the states that pass very, very specific MCIC legislation. And that proposal is 30 pages of very specific language. States cannot change the language in any significant way and still participate in the compact. So it's a very interesting perspective, and it is this kind of contract between the states individually and the compact as a whole. The Counseling Compact, you may already be aware, has been passed in 17 states. We're going to talk more about how that's going to look, and we actually have a map later on to show how this is spreading out. But the first 10 states passed the compact. As soon as that happened, the machinery started to work. And as of October in 2022, last October, the Counseling Compact Commission was formulated and came into operations. Now, we talked about some of the requirements a few moments ago, but there will be additional things that will need to be considered under the rules of the Counseling Compact. And so that's what they're working on at the present time. Next.
Thank you, Gray, and thank you all for being here. I wanted to talk specifically about how the Counseling Compact impacts state laws, because that is certainly a big concern both for legislatures and state governments, as well as for all of us. So the compact, as Gray mentioned, really requires this detailed, the states have to adopt this language. And the intent with the language is to protect the sovereignty or scope of practice in any state. So the compact really has no impact on the scope of practice between states. There are some subtle differences within scopes of practice for each state as a licensed mental health counselor. So the states will control their licensing requirements. Similarly, state laws and rules will not be affected. Mental health counselors who practice due to the compact, however, are also subject to the laws and rules of the state in which the client resides. So what this really means by example is, up until about 3 years ago in Utah, licensed mental health counselors were omitted from being able to provide custody evaluations in the state of Utah. So if a counselor maybe in Colorado, a neighboring state, was engaged in the compact and wanted to do a custody evaluation back 3 years ago, they would not be allowed to do that in Utah through the compact because it was outside the scope of practice for Utah. They could do that in Colorado if it was within that scope, but not in the state. So I think this really, I guess if you're participating in the compact and engaging in therapy through that privilege to practice in a different state, you really have to know the laws and rules related to that state. This can also come into play when it comes to liability. Different states have different liability, especially when it comes to clinical supervision. For example, Utah is a strict liability state. Other states have different levels of liability. And similarly with reporting laws, for adult protective services or child abuse reporting. So you would need to know that what the state law and rules are for the state in which your client resides, as well as adhering to your own state's and license laws and rules. Yeah, and as we've said previously, one of the big confusions with the counseling compact that I've heard, at least as I've talked more about this and professionals have reached out to me, is that the compact does not apply to anyone who is not licensed as a clinical mental health counselor, whatever that degree is. I know in Florida, I was an LMHC, I've been a LCPC, so whatever those acronyms are for your license, it must be that designation. It cannot be any of these other licenses that we see. So it does not apply.
And it might be interesting to point out the social workers are now working on their social work compact at the national level, and that's going to be rolling out this year, I believe.
Yep. Nope, that is coming up very soon. And psychologists, of course, already have the SIPAC, so they are already engaged in that.
So then we switch over to the ethical considerations, and the compact really looks at the ACA and AMHCA codes of ethics. Those are the two organizations that really monitor clinical mental health counselors. The laws and rules and codes of ethics in each state where the client resides is what's really important to pay attention to, because the state is what will be regulating the individual's license from their home state. They can be part of the compact and be in different states, but it will go back to the onus of their home state. And when we were really looking at the telehealth code of ethics, we spent a lot of time on this as part of the ethics board, and it came down to two really important pieces of information for us. One is training. It's really crucial that people have training and understand telehealth, understand what the ethical obligations of the clinician is, and how to know when somebody is suitable for telehealth. The other big piece is being able to know what to do when we're working with somebody via telehealth and there's an emergency or a crisis. Where are they? What are the emergency numbers, or how to get help if help is needed through telehealth. It's pretty easy when they're in your own office and you know what to do with them. But once somebody starts traveling and they're in other states, it's really important to understand where are they and what's available for them. And again, as we've reiterated a few times here, it's home state ethics. And that's been, as we go around to different states talking with people who are looking at the compact, this is one of the huge issues that people keep bringing up is we're going to lose our rights to sort of govern the licensed person, but that is not true. It's home state ethics, laws, and rules still apply.
And I think too, Jerry, just wanted to add to that, the telehealth definitely goes to that scope of practice as well. So each state has their own laws and rules about telehealth and how that should be regulated. So I think as mental health counselors, we not only need to adhere to our code of ethics, as well as understanding, all of the state intricacies. I just want to address a question in chat really quick, because we've talked about it a few times and wanted to clarify, which is that the compact only applies to independent practitioners. So whatever your state credentials are, you must be able to practice independently without supervision.
And that's a really important factor. Everything else is kind of almost secondary to that. You must have a full license and be able to practice without supervision and without any other limitations on your license per se in terms of independent practice. So this kind of gives you the update of where we are. Somebody asked about that in chat earlier on. And so we've got 17 states that passed it, and basically that was done in 2022. At the present time, 20 states are considering that in their legislative sessions. In other words, the legislation is being undertaken to be considered by the state legislature. The Counseling Compact Commission, of course, is going to determine the rules, the bylaws, policies, et cetera, that govern how this is all administered for those who participate in the compact. Let me give you an example of that. Because there is this privilege to practice across state lines, if somebody has a complaint, if I'm offering services, let's just say in Washington state, to somebody that I previously saw in Utah, for example, and they have a complaint against me, then they will file that in Washington state. And then that will come through the Counseling Compact Commission, who is monitoring all of this, and then inform Utah. So there's some administrative overhead costs. They haven't all been worked out yet, but this has been done before in other compacts. So it'll work from time to time. The rules and bylaws, by the way, of the Counseling Compact Commission, we look to see primarily published later on in this year. So this is really moving forward fast. In fact, as I was right at the first time when the Counseling Compact was put together as a possibility, we had no idea how fast things were going to move. And I think our next slide will kind of show this. So here's the map. And it's a little bit confusing, but the navy blue states have passed the Counseling Compact. The light blue states are the ones where it's a moving train, and sometimes it's hard for us to keep up to date as to which are the newest states. In fact, New Mexico is one of the newest states. So you can see here in Utah, we're kind of exciting that Colorado has already passed it, and Wyoming or New Mexico are in that process, as is Washington State. You can see in the Midwest, a great many states have considered that, are considering that. And then down in the Southeast and a little bit more up in the Northeast, we're seeing a lot of states either passing it or considering passing it. There's a fourth category here, the black boxes up on the top. And that simply means, did a state actually consider in their legislature to pass the Counseling Compact and then decided not to do that? That has not happened so far. So there are no black states that we know of. And so we're excited. So between 17 states that have passed it and 20 states that are considering it in this legislative session, we have at least the potential of 37 states passing the compact in fairly short order. This is very unusual. The Nurses Compact rolled out much slower across the country. And I think we're ready to move on to the next one. Somebody asked, where has it passed? You saw it on the map, but this gives you a little bit more of a breakdown in terms of where it's actually passed as opposed to the states where it's currently pending legislation. And by the way, I might add, interesting stories. Every state's a little different, and that's okay. But Jerry and I were on a call with the folks up in Vermont a few weeks ago, and they had some very interesting questions. I'm pleased to say those questions can be answered to the satisfaction of the state legislators. And if it goes to the governor for signature and he has a questions, we can, or she can, we can answer those questions as well. But it's quite a different process. We're excited about all of these states that are pending legislation. It'll be interesting to see how they roll out during this calendar year of 2023. And we'll turn the time over to Jerry on this one.
So there's an actual commission, the Counseling Compact Commission, and after the first 10 states joined, then this, like Gray said earlier, the commission started. They started meeting, and the commission is composed of representatives of the states which have enacted the Counseling Compact, and then there are 4 ex officio members, and these are non-voting members. And the American Mental Health Counselors are one of them, as along with the American Counseling Association, ACA, the Board for Certified Counselors, and the American Association of State Counseling Boards. So they're all considered ex officios, and they come to the table with the commission. But like I said earlier, they don't have a voting right, but they certainly have a loud voice and can be part of what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, as Dr. Smith noted, who is our representative at this time? Beverly Smith, Executive Director for AMHCA. Their voice is well heard, and they do provide guidance and kind of help the Counseling Commission have its work go forward. By the way, we're getting a lot of comments in chat, and some of them we're going to be able to kind of weave in. Some of them will be answered as we go through the presentation. Most of them will be answered at the time. So we're not ignoring you. Just want you to be aware of that. Now, it's interesting, as Jerry and I were talking in Vermont, one of the things that kept coming up was this Counseling Compact license. Well, I'm sorry, there is no Counseling Compact license. There is a Counseling Compact privilege to practice. And that's what it entails. You don't get a separate license. You get a overview of the privilege to practice in other states. And you see that the requirements as they are now is to have, again, that fully independent license to practice on your own in your home state. And must be a member, and that, of course, that state must be a part of the Counseling Compact. No encumbrances for the last 2 years. Some are going to require background checks, some not, but we assume that that's going to be. To practice, to get that privilege to practice, you get that overall privilege to practice within the compact. And then, for example, if I'm in Utah and I have some people that I want to see in Colorado, then I'm going to actually apply through the Counseling Compact to be recognized to practice in Colorado. And in order to do that, there may be some fees, and I would say likely will be some fees. They'll kept at a, the example that Jerry offered earlier. If you're practicing in 4 states right now, you're going to have to pay the licensing fees in all 4 of those states independently. Under the Counseling Compact, that cost will be greatly reduced because the administrative overhead cost is greatly reduced. So. And then you need to, if the state requires jurisprudence requirements, some states require kind of a little test on their laws or ethics. And then, of course, there is this obligation to report adverse actions or encumbrances or restrictions by any non-member state. So those are all of the elements. There may be some other rules associated with privilege to practice, and we don't know what they are. we've got some pretty good ideas, some of them that aren't, but we'll continue to go forward with this presentation.
Yeah. I think before I wanted to answer one question from the chat quickly because it applies to this. When we talk about state code of ethics, that applies to your home state. So the state that you are licensed in, you adhere to your home state. For Utah, where I'm licensed, it would be the AMHCA code of ethics. The laws and rules apply to both your home state and the state where the client is located. So hopefully that distinction is more clear now.
Appreciate you mentioning that, Anna. That's exactly right.
I wanted to talk a little bit about and give some examples, and Jerry will as well, about how we came about passing the compact in Utah. I think one thing and one reason why we've seen this huge push across the nation for the counseling compact really has to do with the mental health workforce shortage and the high rates of mental health need that has certainly been exacerbated since the pandemic. In Utah, that has been severely critical. Utah is one of the most high need as far as workforce shortage for mental health, as well as mental health issues in the nation, unfortunately. So that really prompted us to get good resolve and reaching out to both legislatures and finding that key legislature who was willing to push this through. We worked with a specific legislature who is known as a bit of a bulldog. And so he was instrumental in getting that passed on the legislative side. However, there was also a lot of work done in between. And part of that in Utah was really, I worked pretty intensely with other associations, specifically NASW Utah and the Utah Marriage and Family Therapy Association, and to really have their support. So when we created that unified front, then it really was able to push through. And certainly working with our Department of Licensing, getting their support was integral, since they are such a huge portion of ultimately will play a role in as this compact goes through. So really, and then also really reaching out to the Compact Commission itself, and reaching out to others who had gone through this process on a national level. And that another huge piece was just keeping our members informed and getting that public voice for mental health counselors in Utah to write their legislatures, to create momentum and excitement through that, through social media and other things. And that was pretty key for us in getting that support and taking it back to the needs and how this compact will help Utah increase its workforce and meet the mental health needs of Utah citizens. That was probably the biggest selling point that pushed the compact through.
And I think that's a really crucial element there. What are the selling points that will resonate with the people, particularly the legislators that you're working with? One of the things we didn't put on this slide, and it wasn't a big one, but it was a significant one. And that is, we get people that are licensed in the military that move into the state. And that was one of those selling points, that they or their spouses, if they were licensed, could come into the state under portability, not go through a bunch of rigmarole if they were fully licensed, and be able to move forward in that context without spending a lot of time going through the Department of Occupational Professional Licensing, getting all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. So there's these little things that are really important, and they may vary from state to state. And getting those questions from the legislators, particularly your sponsors, and then figuring out, okay, what will make a difference in helping them understand how this can benefit the people of your particular state.
So ours in Maine was not much different. So we started out with just really doing our homework, trying to understand what is the counseling compact, so that we would have that information up front when people started asking us questions. We gathered a ton of information from the counseling compact for the Council of State Governments, and you can still find a lot of information there So it's thecounselingcompact.org. And but we met with them, we Zoomed with them, we worked with AMHCA to just try to understand what is this, what's the benefit for us, why should we even bother to do it. And then we got our professional organization at home, Maine Mental Health Counselors Association. We got them involved and got their support for this, which was great. Then the next thing we did is we searched for the right legislator, and that's for us was absolutely key, because and we've seen this in a couple of states that we've been visiting to try to help them. With a legislator who does not understand this, you can get yourself in some trouble, where they start attaching other laws and bills, other bills to the counseling compact bill, or they start trying to change it to meet the state needs. And so our legislator, she was a mental health counselor. She was a social worker with a bachelor's degree, and then became a clinical counselor. So she totally understood what it is, what we were trying to do. So then we had our legislator meet with the Council for State Governance, and we, as well as with our professional organization, and started really talking about what's our strategy. And we gathered, information from other states. We were 7 or 8. I don't remember which state we were to finally get in, but our goal was to get into that first 10. And so we really rallied. But then and we met with Georgia. Georgia was the first state to go through. So we met with folks from Georgia to try to better understand how they were going about this. Next slide, Anna.
Yep.
Thank you. So in Maine, we have a 2-year legislative process. All bills that go in the first year are heard. But in the second year, that's the emergency year, that really only about a quarter of the bills will go through. They just get rid of them. And we were going in under an emergency. And our emergency was exactly as Anna had already described, and as well as Gray, is the emergency was, COVID and lack of services. And the other emergency was the fact that, all these students were going back to their home states, and we weren't being able to provide continuity of care. So the timing was just very perfect. And so then the bill passed, and it passed quite easily. But we also, we brainstormed with the Legislative Council. We made sure that they could understand the importance of this bill. We sought out agencies, hospitals, clinicians from all disciplines. We tapped into using social workers and psychologists to help us. Of course, the psychologists had already gone through this, and the social workers were not yet. And so, they helped us, we'll help them. And so it worked out well. And then when it came time for testimony, AMHCA and the council provided testimony. We had no real negative feedback, but our licensing board, their concern was that it's just going to take time and cost money that we hadn't really planned on in the state of Maine. And so it was complicated, because they wanted the counseling compact, but they were really pretty clear that they weren't sure how they were going to be able to manage it. But that was really our only negative, and it wasn't really a negative, it was just a concern. And then what really worked for us is we use social media like crazy to share information. We also really, like I said earlier, we tapped into our colleagues from other disciplines, and they helped incredibly. And but really the big thing for us really was finding the right legislator. So that's for those states, those of you who are looking at trying to get this rolling for yourself, that's really, for me, that was our key, was somebody who understood the language and could help guide us, because we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We understood the concept, of the counseling compact at that point, but we didn't understand really how these bills were in and what goes on behind the scenes. And so she was really helpful.
I would echo that again, and we mentioned it previously in Utah. Thanks, Anna. But that's the key that turns the lock and unlocks it.
Mhm.
And you start there, and it does take a little research to find out who's going to be in your corner and the people that are really willing to listen and then therefore promote it. So absolutely correct. Thank you.
Another piece of that too is trying to make sure that you own it. So some of the states, their licensing board has submitted it, and the professional organization doesn't even know what's going on. And so it looks like they're not supportive, but they don't understand it. And so if there's a way to make sure that your professional organization owns what's going on and is part of the process, I think that's really important as well. And so for me, right now we're in this world of mobility, and this compact it will open up everything for us. And basically, like I said earlier, people were doing this anyway. Our clients were leaving, they were going to other states, and people were doing it and just not telling people that they were doing it, or they were not asking permission. They were just doing it and figuring, if I get caught, I get caught. Now this makes it so that people don't have to choose between law and ethics, and also just really being able to and that continuity of care, because that's, for me, that's what most people who I knew were doing telehealth across state lines and not telling people or not asking for permission. They were sort of under the guise of, this is continuity of care. When my clients go to another state to take care of their family who is sick with COVID, for example, or whatever it is, I've got to continue to be working with them. I can't say, gee, that's too bad. You're in another state now, so I can't see you. And so people were just doing it and not telling people. This way they can do it as long as both states are part of the compact and they choose to be part of the compact. And the other big thing for us, again, and being up in the Northeast, to be able to be working right alongside with our neighboring states. And I just think that that's very exciting to not be in our silos. And you can see from that map, how there are clusters around the country that are beginning to come together, and it's very, very exciting. So, thank you.
So one of the things that the AMHCA Counseling Compact Committee has done is gone through and create what we call the AMHCA Steps to Passage. And these are just kind of the 6 primary sections. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it is a resource that's available to you. And somebody asked, is this webinar going to be available? The slides are going to be available. As far as I know, Rebecca can correct me if I'm wrong. We certainly try to make them available, along with, if you need this, it just breaks down what Anna and Jerry have talked about as to how these are the things to consider. It doesn't mean you have to follow it step by step. It just means that these are some things to consider that kind of lays out the roadmap, first off, of your understanding the compact, then what is necessary in terms of preparation. And I mentioned a few moments ago this idea, and we've all talked about it, these selling points. Who's going to be that chief sponsor? How can we get them informed? How can we do education and identify the stakeholders? And then brief members of the state associations. It's just amazing to me that sometimes the associations don't know, but at any rate, then we move. Once you've done all of that work, then you go into the legislative steps, and you can look at the previous state compacts. Certainly meetings one-on-one with legislatures is important. I would mention, and we're going to talk about it again, there are other people who can meet with them. So for example, the members of the AMHCA Counseling Compact Committee, as I've mentioned, Jerry and I have met with people in Vermont. Others have met with other folks. And so we're available. Yes, there can be a representative from the Council of State Governments that can also meet, can provide testimony. Then, of course, make sure that you know the process for passing the bills in your state, and gather and support all of those resources. You may need a writing campaign. You may need a email campaign. You may need a telephone, whatever works in your state, to make sure that your other legislators are informed. And then we like to say, don't forget, celebrate. If it doesn't work, try again. But the really good news there is almost every time that we know of so far, it has worked. It just makes too much sense. and legislators are willing to come on board primarily because it increases access to mental health resources.
No, and I think that's so important. I know Wyoming, they tried to pass it in 2022 and it did not go through. And then they are in the process of hopefully passing it now, this legislative session. So I think there's sometimes just a timing or some misinformation. So, you know, keep at it if it doesn't work the first time.
Yeah, and Wyoming did not, as I understand it, reject it. It just didn't make it through the legislative process in 2022. And so that's going to happen in some states. It doesn't mean that the compact failed. It meant that for whatever reason, you know, the calendar got too full for other state legislative initiatives or whatever. It's interesting to see how this plays out, but we're excited about Wyoming and all of the other states where it's pending. Thank you for bringing that up, Anna. We're off to Q&A. So we're getting close.
Yeah.
I want you to know that this is scheduled to go an hour and a half. We're going to try and get some of those questions up front, but we're going to take all of the questions that we didn't get answered as we finish up this webinar. So I think we're on time. Anna, you want to take this one?
Sure.
I'm sorry, this is Jerry.
Jerry.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Jerry.
go, Jerry.
We use these asterisks to tell us who's speaking. Jerry, this is yours. My apologies.
Well, what's funny is we use these, but then it's hidden down below my toolbar. So a lot of these questions have already been answered. And if you want to just bring all of them up right on my page, then that would be easy. So is there a different process for individual practitioners or agencies? This is only for individual practitioners, and the individual must qualify for it. So there's, it's not a license, it's a privilege, and it's the individual practitioner's privilege to practice in another compact state if they choose to apply to that, to want that state. And like we already said earlier, you have to make that decision which states you want to be part of, and then there'll be more than likely fees to that as well. If you,
I might just add to that, Jerry,
yep.
If an agency had 3 or 4 or 10 fully licensed counselors and they wanted to kind of go in and do this, they could, but they would still individually have to do it. The agency might coordinate how they did it and when they submitted it and reviewed the applications, but it's still, as Jerry, you said, it's just an individual, it's applying for a privilege to practice.
Right. And it's not like an agency license to practice in another state.
No. So,
will there be a published link from the Counseling Compact Commission to announce Practice Act of specific states? And that's unknown. There will certainly be a database. You can be watching the Counseling Compact Commission and their meetings. They're all on Zoom, so you can be watching those. In fact, there's one today that we're missing. How would state grandparenting provisions be made in regard to the Counseling Compact? Again, we don't know about that, but what we do know is the Counseling Compact clearly specifies that somebody must be a fully licensed mental health counselor. They must have the independent rights. And so I know that in the chat, there were a couple of questions about, can a conditional counselor or somebody who's under supervision? And the way it's written is it's a fully independently licensed clinical mental health counselor. Okay. And I do know that in a couple of states, they tried changing that, and the compact said, no, you can't change it. This is the way it is. Will provisions of the compact apply the same or differently for those who did not graduate from KCREP schools? This is not a KCREP issue. This is KCREP. There are standards that the Counseling Compact developed for licensed people to meet, but they are not KCREP standards per se, and it doesn't have anything in the Counseling Compact that speaks specifically to KCREP.
And that's an important thing to note.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is.
That
Can a
KCREP
state
is not even mentioned. I'm sorry to talk over you, Jerry. I apologize, but
that's okay.
That's not even in the compact language. There's no mention of KCREP one way or the other. Just wanted to emphasize
exactly. Yeah. So that way, it clearly does not alienate schools that are non-KCREP. Can states set higher standards? Absolutely, they can. And how will malpractice insurance be impacted? We don't believe it will be. It may be that once you start getting licensed in different states, there may be different riders or whatever your individual malpractice insurance is. And that will just be something that you'll have to take up with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
And I think, Gray?
So- No,
no, I'm
that's
sorry.
me. Okay, so I'm gonna pull these all up so I can pay attention to you all. So continuing with some common questions, as we've done similar presentations, these have been the most common. So the privilege per practice, as we said, no disciplinary action. And one thing was encumbrance. There was a question in chat with encumbrance. That really is anything that would prevent you from practicing or any disciplinary action, something in your home state that's impacting that. It does apply to all states within the compact, but it is not a multi-state license. So you will apply for that privilege to practice separately for each state you would like to practice in. And telehealth, yes, it is certainly built for telehealth and in person. So this applies to not only telehealth, but if I'm working in Logan, Utah, which right on the border is in Idaho, if Idaho also passed the counseling compact, then I could see clients in Idaho, possibly very similarly. Or also due to the telehealth piece. Some of the more common questions really are related to CEs. So it is our understanding that you will only be responsible to maintain any CE requirements from your home state. I know that the home state is the state in which you reside, is my understanding. For individuals who are licensed in multiple states, it is the state of your residency. So you would maintain those CE requirements and would not be required to do additional CEs. Military and service members, this is important to me. I was a military spouse for a long time. And had to change licenses multiple times, which was quite a cost for me. The compact does allow for a military active duty member or spouse to designate a home state for the duration of the active duty. So had the counseling compact been in place, my home state would have been Utah. And as we moved across the country, I could have just applied for that privilege to practice as long as those states were a part of the counseling compact, which really would have lessened our burden financially and time-wise. It gets very confusing when you have to apply for multiple state licenses. Telehealth, again, must adhere to the laws in those states, and sanctions by another state. This is also still being worked on in rules with the Counseling Compact Commission, but it really is our understanding that the home state would be the one who would take any adverse action against the license. However, other states can remove your privilege to practice, and they may initiate joint investigations. And all states must report all actions to the Compact Commission data system, whatever that will look like. So this is really key in that you may have multiple actions. I think especially thinking about when, from hiring from out of state, which I do frequently, checking those different licensing boards. If it's part of the Counseling Compact, it may also ease the administrative burden for hiring clinicians to be able to check that Compact Commission database as well. A question just came through with the chat. When will applications open? Unclear. The Compact Commission is now working on all of those rules and guidelines. And we're thinking maybe the end of this year or early 2024 is the current goal.
Yes.
Sorry, it's being slow. There we go. Jerry.
So if you're looking for more information, there is a lot of information at the counselingcompact.org website. They have fact sheets, question and answers. They have an overview of proposed legislations, the complete language for the proposed legislation. They have letters from different organizations and different individuals. So if you do need any kind of support, that's where you would go to. Us also. I mean, we are happy to help you and meet with you. But the counselingcompact.org is the home base for all of this. And so I would definitely check that out. And that's where we started in trying to just understand the language. What does this mean? And we started there.
And we can talk about some resources available from AMHCA. AMHCA's been involved with the Counseling Compact from the initial inception of it. And I do want to give a shout out to Georgia, who was the first state, and then virtually nearly all of the other states. It's been because of those state chapters and because of the support that's been given to them by AMHCA and others, but it's made a big difference. And we're really privileged. You know, AMHCA's been working on this now for about 3 years, and I'm very active in it for all of 2022 and of course this year. So I did mention earlier some resources that you can check on is the Counseling Compact Steps to Passage. Those step-by-step ideas, considerations, you might say recommendations, but certainly just a kind of a guide, if you will. We did mention earlier that members of our committee have testified at legislative committees, hearings, licensing boards. Anybody that has some questions and they want to talk to somebody where the Counseling Compact has already been passed, or others that are actively engaged in getting the compact passed. We do have a number of committee members that are more than willing to volunteer their time, normally done by Zoom, but today's world, that works very effectively. As Jerry and I met with the folks from Vermont, I think it lasted about 2 hours. In the last 20 minutes, they just bombarded us with questions. And I think Jerry did a great job, and I tried to help out answering those questions. But since she was from that neck of the woods, her comments and answers were very, very credible. And that's what we're talking about here, is establishing credibility. We certainly can provide consultation with state chapter leaders or individuals working to pass the Counseling Compact. We're not making this AMHCA only. If somebody's interested and we've talked to people that say, hey, we understand you've got this Counseling Compact committee at AMHCA, can we talk to you? Yeah, by all means. And what can we do to be of support? We do support one-on-one meetings with state legislators, could be members of our committee, could be somebody from the Council of State Governments, as we mentioned earlier. And there may be some other requests that we haven't seen yet, but if there's interest, we're available to provide any assistance that's reasonably can be offered. You've got our emails on the first slide, and we're certainly available to aid you in what efforts, whatever questions that you might have. And as we finish up, some final thoughts. This is the thing that gets me excited, going back to how we entitled this. I don't think anything has raised the awareness of what AMHCA leaders have done and the work that has been in kind of going forward with legislators passing the Counseling Compact in so many states. Again, this has rolled forward much faster than I think anybody, even the folks at the Council of State Governments, anticipated. And it really has raised the stature, the awareness and the stature of the profession of clinical mental health counseling to the public and to the other professions. At least that's what's been the case in our area in Utah, and I'm sure that's been true in Maine and in virtually all of the other states. And I think the most important thing here, and we keep this as the focus, the passage of the compact will increase access to therapy for thousands of people. And I always like to say, we're not making a difference in individuals' lives. Yes, we're doing that, but we're making a difference in people's lives sometimes for generations, and we just don't know it. It's pretty exciting when you think about what our profession's all about. And the next slide. So there's our questions that we're going to entertain at this point. You've got those phone numbers and emails. If I'd like to touch base with any of us, you're certainly welcome to do that. Our Council and Compact Committee meetings are held on a monthly basis, and we can get that information to you if you'd like to participate. We'd love to have additional committee members. But having said that, what did I miss, Jerry?
I think
Nothing that I can think of. Anna?
Yeah,
I don't think anything. I think right now, I think it would be a good time to go through some of these questions. Because there are some questions that we did not get to. So I'm happy to read those if you would like.
yep. Why don't you just go ahead and do
yeah.
that, Anna, and we'll try to hit them all.
So one question was, if you're licensed in a state where it has passed but do not reside in that state, does it apply to you?
Well, the long and the short of it is you got to have a home state. And that's where your license still must be current. The only exception are military spouses that Anna described earlier. So you must have a home state. That home state must be a part of the counseling compact. In other words, it passes the legislation. And then you can apply for privilege to practice. I also heard something about, well, will I have to maintain licenses in multiple states because I already have them in 2 or 3 or 4 states? And the answer is, that's your choice, and you certainly can. But if those 3 or 4 states join the compact, then you have a different approach, and you may not have to pay quite so many licensing fees and nor go through all of the applications and jumping through the hoops for the state licensing boards. So again, lots of options there. And by the way, one other mention in that context, the states are passing legislation that allows more access. They're independent of the counseling compact. And that's perfectly okay too. There's nothing here that conflicts with what the states are doing. So for example, Utah is passing legislation this year to enable other professions to practice within the state across state lines if they go through a kind of a minimized practice. We have a dearth of psychiatrists, and so we plan on allowing that to happen in Utah. Again, it's outside the compact, but there's nothing against it.
So this question, and I'll answer this one. So question about states that don't have a 60-degree requirement. How does the compact manage that? It is our understanding, and the compact language does require a 60-degree credit requirement. As we said, it does not specify KCREP, but you do have to have a 60 credit hour degree to pass the compact. So those states would have to change their licensing rules, which has been a sticking point in some states. Similarly, about questions about national examinations. From what I've seen with the Counseling Compact Commission and the meetings that I've watched, there is likely going to be a reference to some type of counseling exam. It is doubtful that they will name the exam. They may give an option. They don't want to, some states require the NCE, some states require the NCMHCE, some states require both. So it's unlikely that they will specify a particular exam, but there will likely be a national exam that you would have to pass to be eligible to participate in the compact with the privilege to practice.
Yeah, and I might mention that there are states now that don't have that 60 hour. They're looking very much to upgrade their requirements to 60 hours. In terms of grandfathering, we don't know. But again, the focus is on fully licensed to practice. So we assume there's going to be some grandfathering provisions that the Counseling Compact Commission will enact. But right now, we don't know until those rules are published.
Another question about the District of Columbia. It's not a state and not listed in the compact. Would they, as an LPC in DC, am I eligible to apply for privilege in Maryland?
And the District of Columbia are like territories. The territories can apply to join the Counseling Compact. How that's specifically going to work out for the District of Columbia, we don't know. My presumption is that they will apply just like another state or a territory. For example, Puerto Rico, they can join the Counseling Compact. I'm sorry, Virgin Islands is another one. We don't know all of the technical answers to that, but we presume that they will be able to, as an entity, apply to join the Counseling Compact, and then the counselors within those territories or the district would be able to participate and get their privileged practice.
Another question, which the individual answered, and I just wanted to read it because I think it's important. When the laws in 2 states did not align, am I correct in assuming the clinician must adhere to the stricter state? I would say yes. That would be my advice.
That would be the safe place.
Yep.
You are held by your own state requirements, but if you're practicing in another state, then you do need to be aware of those state laws and requirements. And if you're going to maintain your own freedom from liability or other issues, then you want to make sure that you're in line with the other state in which you're practicing.
Another
There were
question.
a few, oh,
Oh, go ahead,
ahead.
Jerry.
I was going to say there were a few questions in there also about insurance and cost. And the compact has nothing to do with how much people are going to be paying for telehealth or whether insurance is going to be reimbursing when you cross state lines. That's something that I think that we all really need to be paying close attention to and legislating in our own states and getting, really getting your professional organizations involved with some of the issues that are happening with cutting the cost of telehealth counseling. But that is unrelated to the Counseling Compact.
Then also clinical supervision, a few questions about if we're in providing clinical supervision in our home state, can we provide supervision in those states where we have a privilege to practice?
Probably not. It would depend on both states, but I would guess that each state is going to maintain a pretty high degree of sovereignty as to what counts for supervision. So if you're getting your license in Utah, you're probably going to see a supervisor that has his or her license in Utah. So it's a possibility, but we don't know, but it's likely that the states will require supervision to stay within their state boundaries. That's my guess. Anybody else have another thought on that one?
No, I agree. I think, yeah, I think sometimes we'll see, but I'd imagine, for example, in Utah, a supervisor has to follow a very strict guidelines that our Department of Licensing has set up for supervision. So I would not imagine that would apply to individuals who are not licensed in Utah.
And I would add the Counseling Compact legislative language that has to be passed does not address supervision in that context at all.
Another question, these privileges are not available now. We have to wait until the Counseling Compact Commission finishes their work and has these compact language, laws, rules set, which again will happen sometime later 2023, early 2024. So even though Utah's passed the compact as well as Florida, I cannot do telehealth with someone in Florida right now.
And again, I'd reemphasize, maybe by the end of this year, quite likely by the first of next year. It's going to be interesting because CMS is going to publish rules as far as Medicare reimbursement for clinical mental health counselors and marriage and family therapists, totally separate, has nothing to do with the Counseling Compact. But we're going to have to wait and see on how these rules are rolled out and then how the application process is actually initiated so that the system is up and operational. It's one thing to publish a rule, it's another thing to administratively make it work in terms of, for example, the Counseling Compact database that will be formulated. By the way, I did catch something in chat. Somebody was able to provide supervision across state lines, if I saw it briefly, I would just add, hey, there's going to be a lot of exceptions. If you can work something out independently, it's legal and it's ethical, that's okay. It's outside. It would be normally outside the bounds of the counseling compact, but there's going to be a lot of situations like that. And so again, the compact doesn't constrain you per se, unless you're operating within the context of the privilege to practice in the counseling compact.
A lot of questions about this grandfathered or individuals who graduated maybe 10, 15 years ago without a 60-hour degree. We just don't know yet, but I imagine that the counseling compact will have some provisions that allow for individuals who are independent practitioners, fully licensed in their states, to be allowed to enter the compact. There may be some cutoff point, and obviously the language in the state has to be a 60-hour degree, but that is what I imagine will happen, but am not completely sure. Any other thoughts, Gray or Jerry, about that?
Well, and that's an interesting concept too, because there are a couple of states that right now do not require the 60 hours. And so they're scrambling to get the state requirement up to 60 so that the state can then become enacted in the compact. So until they get up to 60-degree program, then, you know, as part of their licensing, they cannot be part of the compact. But once they are part of the compact, that's when the rules we'll see what the rules show us. But I suspect you're right, that once a state is in, because they've met the minimal criteria, then the individuals within the state, if they're already licensed in that state, I think we'll see rules developed around that by the council.
I would echo that. There are some states that are already, and Utah's one of them, that enacted portability. And the whole construct of portability basically says, if you're fully licensed, we're going to acknowledge and accept you're fully licensed. You might have been licensed under 48 hours or other requirements, but you've been practicing, you're qualified, and we're going to accept that. I can't see that the Counseling Compact Commission rules will vary from that very much, if at all.
Yeah, then there's just more questions that I've seen. So I just wanted, Jerry already addressed this, but hit on this again when it comes to insurance reimbursement, telehealth, wages. It really is a more complex level when you're thinking about, especially with insurance reimbursement. The Counseling Compact does not address insurance reimbursement. Some insurance carriers allow and will pay for telehealth. Some are more strict on that. So it really is up to your individual contract with the insurance provider that you're paneled under, and knowing those laws and rules. And the Compact Commission is really separate from that. As far as the reimbursement and those things, they are completely separate from the insurance requirements, which may look different and certainly adds a greater level of complexity to the work we already do.
I might add, in that context, insurance companies are controlled on a state-by-state basis, even though some companies, many companies, go across state lines, kind of like, almost like a compact. But yeah, it's going to be what your state allows for in insurance. So you want to look at your companies, as Anna just said, but you may also want to look at what the state provisions are totally outside of the compact, and the compact will not be able to address any of that. But it's something that, for example, your state chapter or you as an individual may want to look into in terms of your reimbursements and how the state monitors and controls all of that.
What other questions that we missed? We certainly got more time. I did see a point about out-of-state supervisor who had to be approved by that specific board as a special circumstance to provide supervision. And I would imagine this would look similar, and it could be a possibility, but we just don't know.
Yes. And unfortunately, we won't know for probably several months. And maybe even not even then, once the rules are published, there's still going to be, rules are adaptable, as you know, in each of your states. Laws take a little bit more effort to change. Rules can be modified fairly rapidly if need be. And I think that's what you're going to see with the Counseling Compact Commission and their rules.
Rebecca, I'm just wondering if there's any questions that we missed.
I think that you guys pretty much hit all of them. I know there were a few admin questions, just kind of like on the video slides, conference, things like that. And I did address that in the chat as well for everybody.
Oh, looks like
It
I
looks like
missed-
we do have a couple people with their hands raised. We do have the ability to, if it's okay with everybody, to unmute people if they want to ask questions live on the air. So for those of you that do have your hands raised, just want to make sure that that is on purpose. But if you do want to ask a question live on the air, we do have the opportunity to do that. So I'm gonna, let's see, it looks like Michelle, if that's okay with you guys, if you don't mind.
Yeah. I think so. We have time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, fine with me.
Michelle had their hand raised first. So Michelle, I've just allowed you the ability to unmute if you would like to ask a question.
By the way, while we're waiting, I did see there was somebody that said that we didn't answer their question in chat. So if you want to repost it in chat, that's another option. But if you want to raise your hand, we've got multiple ways to hopefully get all of your questions answered.
I know we've had a lot of questions come through and a lot of them were duplicates. Let's see, I'm scrolling back to see if I can find that question.
Double
Let's see
checking,
here.
and Michelle did not come back on, and she might have had to leave. Oh, here's one.
Disable that. We'll go to the next one. We've got Karen. One moment. Let's see here. All right, Karen, you're able to unmute.
Hi, thank you so much for a really great presentation. I'm in New York and I always think of New York. I'm a counselor educator here as well as a therapist. And I'm always struck by how difficult New York can be. So the fact that New York is in light blue is fantastic. And I'm just wondering if you can tell me who's involved in New York in advocating for this and how I could. I know a little bit about our state chapter and we have a lobbyist, but I haven't heard much about the compact getting this far. So I'm just wondering if you can give me some people to be in touch with.
What is it? I'm trying to remember.
Is Fred still on?
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what I
because we were
was
just
wondering.
talking. Yeah, we were just talking about that too. And I don't have the name right off. I know I wrote a letter in support of it from Maine, but it was the Mental Health Counselors Association. Fred, there you are. Can you come up with the name of a contact for Karen?
Fred, you may be not aware that you're muted.
Mhm.
You might be looking for somebody. By the way, Karen, you're always welcome to join the Counseling Compact Committee for AMHCA. That's one way to stay in touch.
That is true.
But
Well,
there has been.
we've
Go
been
ahead, Karen.
struggling. We struggled for so long to get licensure, and now we're
Yeah.
working on diagnostic privilege. That this was, I didn't even know we were actually looking at this. Last time I looked, we were one of the gray states. So this is forward movement.
Yeah, and I think part of it has been around this diagnosis question that we were
Yeah.
aware of in New York, and I think it is being attended to. Fred, do you have any more information?
I think one thing too, Karen, you can email any one of us and we can research that. So if you want to
Okay.
email Ray, then we can research that and talk to our committee, because I know that we have members who have talked about that and are actively working, and we can get you the contact information for who is heading that up in New
Sure.
York.
Maybe Jerry, I might email you because you're in Maine and that's a Northeast area, maybe, or Gray, either one actually, but
Yeah.
you're in our neck of the woods, so I will follow up. Thank you so much.
Sounds perfect. Great, thank you.
And we did have another question from Courtney. Does AMHCA or the Compact Commission plan to have a reference to the rules in each state that has joined? I doubt it.
I
would be-
have tried year after year to develop something like that. I have a spreadsheet that it changes so fast. So it really is a matter of going in and looking at these rules, and I haven't updated it for about 2 years.
It's a monumental task. We just, one of the members of
Yeah.
our committee has provided a state-by-state breakout in terms of what's the requirements to become fully licensure, and we can make that available if people are interested. But again, each legislative session, even here in Utah, that's changed this last year, so it's hard to keep up with all of that stuff. Now, whether the Counseling Commission will venture into that territory, I don't know, but it would be somebody's full-time job.
Courtney has her hand raised, if you guys don't mind for me to unmute her real quick.
Sure.
Courtney, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for answering that. I was thinking more of like a reference to here's where the administrative code or Iowa administrative code or code is located, not as in like, here are the requirements. That way, when they change, they're usually the same chapters unless they've added a chapter. But as long as we have the reference to where they are, that would be more helpful than actually the content, because I do understand the content changes. So that may be a better way to track that. But I'm hoping the commission, it has state licensing board professionals on it. And so I'm hoping that they can wrangle that a little better than even we could, because they are literally the people making them. So
That's an excellent
Courtney,
idea.
if you
and I
wanna-
think- Go ahead, Jerry.
I was going to say, if you want to email me, I can send you the Excel sheet that I have developed. That minimally what it does is it will give you the link to every single state and their licensing, the licensing board anyway.
excellent. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And I think the other thing to address that, Courtney, your idea about the Counseling Compact Commission, yeah, they're going to have representatives from each state on that commission. Let's also put that as a note to Beverly Smith, our AMHCA representative, as an idea that they ought to do that too. They ought to stay up on it. And like you said, Courtney, that's doable by them, and probably, I would say, a very, very excellent idea. So if you're going to get a privilege to practice, that you can now have this reference and go directly to that state and double check their rules. Thank you for bringing that up.
Another question from Loretta, unless anyone else has their hand raised, Rebecca, is what were the greatest challenges that you experienced in getting your states to endorse the compact?
We did, it's interesting.
Misinformation.
Yeah.
Misinformation. The fear of people coming from other states coming in and doing things that they're not allowed to do in Maine. The biggest one in Maine was abortion issues and conversion therapy. We have a prohibition against conversion therapy, and the fear was that people from other states would come in and start doing conversion therapy. So those were some of our really, really big ones that just no matter how much we kept trying to help people understand that that's not what was going to be happening, there was just a lot of misinformation.
And I think you raise up some big points, because again, that came up in Jerry and I's testimony and their discussion about, for example, a state that, should I say anything politically? Some states, let's say, tend to lean much more conservative, and others tend to lean more liberal. If you happen to be in a more liberal state and you're now working with somebody in a more conservative state, or vice versa, you would want to be sensitive to what you do or do not. And, with all of these issues, transgender, conversion, abortion, which is just raging all over the place, our job is not to make recommendations to people. Our job is to help them make their own decisions under informed consent and their own ability to choose what's in their best interest. So I think if we practice ethically, I don't think we have to worry too much if we're in this state or that state. That may be quite different in terms of how the state has passed certain laws. The other thing I would add, it was interesting, it kind of goes back to what Jerry was mentioning here in Utah. Once we had a chance to talk to people and answer their questions, so we made a little presentation, and it was specifically like 5 or 6 slides, and to answer the questions. What's this all about? What does this do for the citizens of Utah in terms of access? Then it was just a matter of answering any other questions, and those we didn't have a whole lot of blowback. In fact, I can't remember any blowback at all. Anna, anything else that I missed on that one?
No, I would agree about the misinformation, and I think that's important, because we certainly, you know, within the Utah Mental Health Counselors Association, there was a lot of misinformation about it applying to marriage and family therapists, or it's starting as soon as it passed, right? Which then could create problems for individuals, believing that they can now do telehealth in Florida, and don't have to do anything else. So I think managing that information, both with the members, with other licensed professions, and then with the legislatures, kind of easing their fear, is really key in how this will impact livelihoods, and, you know, some of those concerns about it potentially decreasing wages and things like that is important.
Yeah, and I think it reemphasized what you just said, Anna. This is continuing to roll, and we're going to have to continue to make our members informed, and the public and any other people that need to be informed, because things are going to roll out over time. It's not a once and done, and oh, by the way, now I can do whatever I want to. We're going to have to keep educating people. If you have a conference, I think that's a really good conference, 1-hour webinar to kind of talk about what this does and also what it doesn't do. So I thought I saw another question came up from a student. Did I catch that?
Yeah,
Just
so Marilyn is interested in joining AMHCA or the Compact Committee.
And we would love to have you. Our committee members are AMHCA members. So it doesn't make any difference if you're a student recently graduated. We'd love to have you join the AMHCA Counseling Compact Committee. So you just get in touch with any one of the 3 of us, and we'll be happy to give you that information. Oh, we don't have, I'm sorry, Rebecca's saying something here. So you might want to double check with what Rebecca just posted.
Yeah, so Rebecca was just saying you can join, reach out to www.amhca.org to join AMHCA, and then also reach out to us if you're interested in joining the committee.
Yeah, we would like you to be an AMHCA member first, but you know, you can do that today and join the committee for our next committee meeting if you'd like to.
Yeah. And then another question, what are the requirements to join? So I'm not sure as far as AMHCA what the requirements are. I don't know, Rebecca. Maybe you answer that best to join the American Mental Health Counseling Association. To participate in the Counseling Compact, it is that full licensure, independent practice.
Yeah, you just might want to check amhca.org, and you know, if you're a student, if you're recently graduated and now have your initial license, or if you're fully licensed, or if you're retired, regardless of your circumstances, you can join AMHCA. And oh, by the way, you're welcome to participate. We get really good thoughts and ideas from the Counseling Compact Commission. When we put that steps to passage together, we thought we had a pretty good program until we started to review it step by step with the committee members, and they came up with excellent ideas, as well as for this briefing today. I think we're almost out of time. Rebecca, is there anything else? Well, let me go back. Jerry, last words?
No, only that, you know, we're really excited to see so many states being active, and please let us know if we can be helpful.
Absolutely. Anna, anything else from your
No,
vantage point?
I think just thinking more about, you know, I've been in practice for, I don't know, a long time, and it's amazing to me how I've seen the counseling profession specifically grow and expand. And I think we're just seeing the start of that now, you know, from being one of the newest professions, master's level licensed professions, to now having this amazing progress with the compact as well as Medicare and you know, Department of Defense recognition, and the Veterans Administration recognition. I think it's just an exciting time to be a mental health counselor and to really see where this is going. And I think the Compact Commission is one piece of that, which will help expand our professional identity, who we are as counselors, and the amazing work that we do in providing mental health therapy to those that most need it. So it's just an exciting time to be a mental health counselor. So I'm glad that you all are here.
And notice the operational word here, excitement. And I hope you're excited individually as well as you participate with your state association and with the American Mental Health Counselors Association, because this is where you really stay informed and this is where you can be really participants fully in the profession. And I would add the excitement of mental health counseling. Thank you, each of you, for your interest in not only in this, but in your devotion and dedication. I always like to say we don't have jobs, we have callings, and you are the best of the best. So thank you for participating with us today. I don't know anything about a certificate of completion because this was just a free informational webinar. So there's no CE credits associated with this. We just wanted you to be better informed. Rebecca, we'll turn the time back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gray. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Anna. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, The Counseling Compact, Exciting Momentum for Our Profession. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey for this presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete that and provide your feedback. Don't forget to look for your follow-up email within the next few days with the recording of today's event. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to our presenters. You can also reach us at education@amhca.org. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.